The Chicago Blackhawks open up training camp and officially introduce Nick Foligno as their new captain.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman2. Make sure to also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And last but certainly not least, gotta let you all know today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. Be sure to go and visit FanDuel.com right now to download America's number one sportsbook. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. The offseason has officially come to a close, Blackhawks fans. Training camp kicked off this morning down at Fifth Third Arena in Chicago. I unfortunately wasn't able to be there, and I won't be there for the rest of this week. However, I will be in attendance next Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So if you plan on going down to Fifth Third Arena any of those days, be sure to hit me up. Would love to chat Blackhawks hockey and always enjoy mingling with viewers and listeners of the show who show some support. But to open things up on today's episode, definitely wanted to go through all the notable takeaways we got from day one of Blackhawks training camp, as I'm going to be doing following every day of training camp leading up to the season opener on October 8th against the Utah Hockey Club. So again, please make sure you hit that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube so you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates leading up to this year's season opener. The first main takeaway that I wanted to talk about, though, from the opening day of training camp was just kind of the intensity and the vibe that was surrounding this first day. What I love to see is the Blackhawks open things up with a scrimmage right out of the gate. And if you're someone who's been listening to episodes throughout the course of this week, when I broke down all of the biggest storylines for you Blackhawks fans to keep an eye on throughout training camp and why this training camp in particular, I believe, is so important for the Chicago Blackhawks, I preached that the coaching staff would have a very, very serious and intense vibe right from the jump, and that's exactly what we got. And that tells me it's all business from the Blackhawks here in this training camp, and that's even what Luke Richardson said to the media. He said, quote, "It's all business this year." And another thing that was notable is when he was speaking with the media, he said that he told players to come in shape, especially the veterans. He wants to make sure those guys are able to set a good example and set the tone right off the gate, right off the press. And he was really happy with what he saw out of those guys. And he was also really happy with the pace that the Blackhawks were able to play with as a result of being in such good shape and having good conditioning on day one. It feels like they didn't have to waste any time kind of ramping things up. They were ready to get to that level right off the hop. And that's exactly what they need to do, because every day, every practice, every opportunity, they got to execute and they got to take advantage of it in order to reach that goal and take that next step this season. So I absolutely loved the intensity and the scrimmaging right off of the jump. And it actually sounds like that's what the Blackhawks are going to be doing for their next three practices as well before next Tuesday, when they kind of start honing in on individual aspects and certain areas in particular. But with the Blackhawks going with a little bit of a scrimmage to kick things off here on day one of training camp, that also gave us an opportunity to get a first glimpse at the forward lines that Luke Richardson wants to start with. And I think it's important to remind everyone that we got to take these things with a grain of salt coming so early in training camp. However, this does at least give us a little bit of perspective, or it does take us into the mind of Luke Richardson. If the season were to start right here, right now, this feels like the lines that he would be going with. So kicking things off on the Blackhawks top line along with Connor Bedard. We know he's going to be the top line center once again this year, but the wingers, who are going to be his wingers, has always been a big question. We got our first little look today as Taylor Hall and Tyler Bertuzzi were the two skating with Bedard on the Blackhawks top line. Bertuzzi is the biggest free agent, at least financial wise, money wise. I don't know why I'm doing this right now. But he is the most expensive free agent that Kyle Davidson has brought in since taking over as Blackhawks general manager, and always felt like a top line wing spot would be a natural fit for him because he is someone who doesn't have to sacrifice offensive skills. He's maybe not a true top liner on a Stanley Cup contender, but he is more capable offensively than Nick Foligno is, and that's not a knock on Nick whatsoever, but it's just a fact of the matter. Tyler Bertuzzi is more offensively capable than Nick Foligno is, and he also plays with a little bit of an edge, which I love. It feels like he'd be a good guy to kind of go out there and mix it up and protect Connor Bedard, step in for some of his teammates. He's not going to let Bedsy go and get bullied out there, and also he plays with size and isn't afraid to mix it up in the dirty areas. And I think that's something the Blackhawks have really missed in their top six forward group for years and years and years. Someone with size and speed. So that's why I think, for multiple different reasons, Tyler Bertuzzi is a natural fit here with Bedard. And Taylor Hall, coming off of a torn ACL, missed the majority of last season, right? However, before he suffered that injury, this was the spot that he was in, and it felt like he was really brought in to be Connor Bedard's line mate as a former number one overall pick himself, someone who has gone through those stresses and those pressures, and he also can help Connor Bedard in terms of his skill set right here, right now. So that always felt like a natural fit. Good to see Taylor Hall back and healthy, looking really good from multiple sources on day one, buzzing during this scrimmage that the Blackhawks ran in that opportunity he's getting with Bedard and Bertuzzi. For the Blackhawks second line, an interesting trio here, Lukas Reichel, who I did not envision getting a top six spot right off the jump, is skating on the second line as the left wing with Philip Kurashev playing down the middle, and Teuvo Teravainen, after a handful of years with the Carolina Hurricanes, returns to the team that drafted him this season and is starting things out on the right wing along with Kurashev and Reichel. Yeah, certainly did not envision this trio together. Kurashev didn't really play center whatsoever last season, and quite honestly, I thought that experiment had kind of came and went. So we'll see how he fares down the middle if he does wind up sticking there throughout the course of the preseason. And for Lukas Reichel, this is one heck of an opportunity, right? I've always talked about how it feels like Reichel's a player who has to play with other skill guys in order to have success. Well, he's getting that opportunity, and he's got to make the most of it if he wants to stay there, or else he's going to risk losing that spot. What I deem to be the Blackhawks' third line is the trio of Nick Foligno, Jason Dickinson, and Ilya Mikheyev, who I think are going to be a defensive nightmare for other teams to play against. Foligno, we know he plays a rugged style and is responsible on the defensive side of things. And then Jason Dickinson has really cemented himself as one of the better defensive forwards in all of the NHL. And Ilya Mikheyev, he probably is more offensively capable than the other two on this line, but he is probably best known for his defensive capabilities as well. So that trio, I think, is a natural fit to be the shutdown checking line for the Blackhawks this year, should they stick together. And then the fourth line, to me, seems like at this point it would be Pat Maroon, Andreas Athanasiou, and Craig Smith. And Athanasiou, quite honestly, I thought he was going to probably be in that spot that Reichel's in. I thought he was going to be in the top six for sure out of the gate, but guess that isn't the case. And what an interesting trio here. Maroon and Craig Smith, two guys who really don't provide much of anything offensively at this stage, don't really play with much of a pace, skating or paired with the best skater on the Blackhawks team. Don't know if that's necessarily a good trio to open things up on the fourth line with, but we'll see if they wind up sticking together moving forward. And then what I deem as the extras line would be the trio of Joey Anderson, Ryan Donato, and Landon Slager. It feels like Joey Anderson and Ryan Donato currently are on the outside looking in terms of being the 13th and 14th forwards. Obviously, we got to take everything with a grain of salt, and it's early. But if things were to start right here, right now, it feels like those would be the two extra forwards on the Blackhawks opening night roster. Landon Slager, more than likely going to open up the year with the Rockford Ice Hogs. The top prospects trio we got to see was the combination of Nick Lardis, Frank Nazar and Colton Dock. And I really would have loved to see that combination together on Saturday in the second game of the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase. Nick Lardis unfortunately had to miss that game due to an illness, but would love to see that trio get some action in a preseason game before Lardis gets sent back down to Brantford. We also saw Savoie, Ludwinski, and Hayes together. I think that's a trio we could see down in Rockford this year. Always love to see Samuel Savoie and Paul Ludwinski together. I think their games complement each other really well away from the puck. And then rounding things out, we got AJ Spellacy, Zach Sanford, and Ryder Rolston. The latter two are going to be with the Rockford Ice Hogs this year. AJ Spellacy, of course, is going to get sent back to Windsor at some point in time. But always interesting to see how these forward lines start here on day one and how they kind of get jumbled or mixed up throughout the next couple of weeks leading up to the season opener. I'm sure we're going to get a look at the defensive pairings during tomorrow's practice. I'll be sure to recap that on tomorrow's episode of the show. Before I move on to segment 2, though, do want to get into some quick injury updates. Artem Levshinov, the second overall pick in this year's draft, and Laurent Brossoit, who was brought in from the Winnipeg Jets this offseason, both did not skate today, which was expected. For Levshinov, he is back in the gym, which is good news. And Richardson also mentioned that he still got some good vibes. He's coming in every day and has kept that smile on his face. So love to hear that this injury hasn't gotten Artem Levshinov down one bit. Hopefully he'll be back sometime sooner rather than later, although I still don't envision him taking part in training camp. And then for Brossoit, sounds like he's still on that same 5 to 7 week timetable that they gave him when the injury was first announced. But Richardson did mention that he's also heard Brossoit is a gym rat and someone who always keeps himself in really good shape, someone who likes to work out 12 months of the year. So whenever he is able to return, it feels like they don't anticipate much of like a buildup being necessary for Brossoit. Yeah, you obviously want to give him some practice time and some reps, but nothing too out of the usual before he'll be back and ready to go for game-like situation. And he's on track to be ready sometime around that season opener on October 8th. We did also get to see Marek Vanacker, 26th overall pick in this year's draft, first round selection. Alex Ferran, Marcel Marcel also skated as well. I think those latter two don't have as much of a serious injury as Vanacker does. We know he underwent shoulder surgery after the Blackhawks drafted him. Isn't expected to be back in game action for Brantford until late October at the earliest, but more than likely mid to early November. But they did skate individually on their own prior to the start of practice. And then a couple of guys who were just banged up last year. Connor Murphy mentioned to the media he missed 46 games for the Blackhawks last year and has really dealt with injury problems the last handful of seasons. But he said he's fully healthy and ready to go whenever the Blackhawks open up training camp next week, believe it or not. Do not forget, training camp preseason, is right around the corner, Blackhawks fans. And then Andreas Athanasiou, not only was Taylor Hall buzzing coming off of an injury, Athanasiou missed a lot of time last year for the Blackhawks as well, but according to multiple beat writers, looked really sharp today. His speed was very noticeable, generated multiple breakaway opportunities in the scrimmage, which isn't surprising whatsoever. Wasn't able to finish any of them, which isn't surprising whatsoever either, but good to see AA buzzing all around. Good to see Taylor Hall buzzing all around, and good to see the Blackhawks having this intensity right off the rip as training camp opened up this morning and they start things out with a scrimmage. They're going to be doing the same for the next 3 days. I'll be sure to recap all of the action going down at Fifth Third Arena right here on Locked On Blackhawks. So make sure you subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Again, 100% free, won't cost you anything, and really does go a long way for yours truly. Gonna take a quick break here, Blackhawks fans, but don't go anywhere because when I return, I'm gonna get into Nick Foligno being introduced as the Blackhawks' new captain. But first, I got to talk to you all about FanDuel. I know you've all heard about FanDuel at this point in time, right? But FanDuel now has something a little bit different for you. Starting now through September 22nd, which is quickly approaching, so got to make sure to capitalize on this deal while it still lasts. If you create an account and put $5 down, you'll get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube and YouTube TV. And then with an NFL Sunday Ticket base plan, you'll be able to watch every out-of-market Sunday afternoon game. You won't just be stuck with the Bears, which is, per usual, been a little bit hair-ripping so far here this year. However, is it financially smart? I don't know, but I am going to be betting on the Bears to bounce back this week against the Indianapolis Colts, plus 120 right now on FanDuel. If you want to tail me and you're not already a member with FanDuel, be sure to go and check out FanDuel.com right now. And when you put $5 down, you'll get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket with YouTube and YouTube TV. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. And if you're not satisfied with the product, you can cancel anytime, anywhere. So be sure to go and check out FanDuel.com right now, and you'll get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV when you put $5 down. Again, that's FanDuel.com to go and download America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just wanted to say thank you again for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen here to start off your day. Now for your second listen, go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the action never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can easily find the link to Locked On NHL down in the description of this video, or simply search on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2. While there certainly was a lot going down on the ice at Fifth Third Arena here today as the Blackhawks opened up training camp, there also was a huge media buzz going down in the media room off of the ice, as Nick Foligno was officially introduced to the media as the 35th captain in Blackhawks franchise history. Of course, just one day after the official announcement, they went and set it in stone here today, giving Nick Foligno his moment in front of the media to be announced as captain of an Original Six franchise. You could tell just what a significant day it was for Foligno. I mean, he's talked about multiple times. I've already gone over the quotes about how important this is for him and why he is such a good fit. But I also thought it was really cool to see who the Blackhawks brought out. I mean, obviously you expected Jamie Faulkner, Kyle Davidson, Luke Richardson to all be there, right? But to bring in Chris Chelios and Denny Savard as former captains to be there. Taylor Hall was up in the media room during this kind of celebration as a former teammate of Nick, going back to their days with the Boston Bruins from a couple of years ago. Obviously came here together, to Chicago, being acquired as a package. And then also assistant captains Seth Jones and Connor Murphy were up in the booth as well. So clearly a very meaningful day for this Blackhawks organization, a very meaningful day for Nick Foligno as well. I'm not going to really dive into like a huge transcript of all the quotes we got from Foligno and from, Danny Wirtz and Richardson and Davidson about how great they think Foligno is and why he perfectly embodies all of this. There are a couple of quotes in particular I'm going to get to that I think stood out from Foligno. But the first thing that I wanted to talk about was how I really appreciated the respect the organization and Foligno showed for Jonathan Toews, who, of course, was the last one to wear the C here after stepping away from the Blackhawks organization, departing the Blackhawks organization after the 2023 campaign. To hear Danny Wirtz say, that Jonathan Toews is everything that embodies a Chicago Blackhawk, and Foligno to say that he's kind of the pillar that this organization stands on. I thought it was really cool in a moment like that was surrounding Foligno, that they still made sure to show their respect and give flowers to Jonathan Toews for everything he did for the organization. And Foligno also mentioned that he did reach out to Jonathan Toews. Doesn't sound like they've connected yet as of this point. I don't think Foligno even had to reach out to Jonathan Toews. I don't think it was 100% necessary, but I think that just perfectly captures the type of guy that Nick Foligno is. Has so much respect, a well-respected veteran who just carries himself so gracefully and always seemingly does the right thing. And that's the type of guy that you absolutely want to have as your captain. But I thought it was really cool that everyone in the situation showed their respect to Jonathan Toews before kind of having this torch passed down to Nick Foligno. But there were a couple of quotes that I did want to be sure to bring up because I think it perfectly embodies kind of what I've been preaching here on the show in terms of the Blackhawks taking that next step. There are three in particular that I wanted to be sure to mention. The first one is, quote, what I'm excited about is a new era, so to speak. It's about throwing this team to that direction and understanding we have a lot of great players coming, an exciting group of players we have this season that I'm really proud to lead with a handful of guys here, and I'm honored to do so. And just speaking about this new era, it's time for the Blackhawks to take that next step and to kind of hone in on being a contending team once again. Looking at the roster that they've been able to put together for this year, all of the veterans they brought in, conglomerating with the young talent, all meshing together at this point in time. It's really, really crucial for many different reasons. And to hear Nick Foligno be excited about kind of being at the helm of this next era of the Chicago Blackhawks, I think is really cool. And I don't think there's anyone else I'd want at the helm of such an important period of time for this franchise than Nick Foligno. And I think Connor Bedard would get a lot of respect if he was named captain, but being only 19 years old, right? Like everything that comes with that and just kind of talking to the players and giving the right message and having all of these perspectives, like I feel like it's easier when Nick Foligno says something to make sure, like to really feel like it's going to get done. And that's not to like doubt Connor Bedard or anything, but when Nick Foligno says something, you just take it so serious because he's, again, that type of well-respected leader. So to hear him say, how excited he is about leading this new era, I absolutely love that. But this was my favorite quote of Nick Foligno's today. Quote, we're going to have a standard that is expected to be met every day. If you don't, you're going to hear about it. And that's, again, something that when Nick Foligno says it, I really believe in. And I think the rest of the guys in the locker room are certainly going to believe that as well. Like if you're dogging it out there, if you're not bringing your best, which is a focal point from top to bottom of this training camp, I preached it. We're hearing Luke Richardson preach it. And it feels like Nick Foligno is the perfect guy to make sure everyone's abiding by that standard, because anything less than the standard risks and puts in jeopardy the Blackhawks not taking the next step this season. So I love to hear Nick Foligno taking that so seriously. And the last one here is, quote, with the help of a lot of guys in the room, we're going to go to work and move this to the place we want to get to. We're proud players in here. This is a proud organization. We want to mimic that on the ice and off the ice. And this kind of goes back to the comments that Nick Foligno was saying towards the end of last year, where he's like, this just can't happen here. Like he was ready to rip his own hair out because of some of the dreadful losses that the Blackhawks have. And he just was like, we have to be better than this. Like we can't be this far down in the dumps. So again, for now to him really be at the center of it, fully in control and to have charge, I really, really believe as he preaches and as he goes, the rest of the Blackhawks are going to follow. So congratulations once again to Nick Foligno. A cool little moment for him today, getting to celebrate being announced as the new captain, the 35th in Blackhawks franchise history. Going to take one final break here, Blackhawks fans, but when I return, still got to take a look back at general manager Kyle Davidson's trades since taking over in early 2021. But first, I got to talk to you all about Game Time. Hockey season is right around the corner, and I cannot wait to get back to the United Center here in Chelsea Dagger, grabbing a cold beverage and enjoying the atmosphere at the Madhouse. And I'm sure many of you Blackhawks fans out there watching or listening to this right now feel the exact same way that I do. And that's why I have to tell you all about Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events, not just hockey, even easier. And I personally have used Game Time for probably close to a decade now, when I was back in high school going to watch the Blackhawks in their glory day. And I still use it to this very day, going down to watch Connor Bedard at the United Center, or when I want to go check out a Cubs game at Wrigley Field with some of my buddies, or if I'm even traveling in another city and want to go see a comedy event or want to go see some stand-up. I make sure to always check out Game Time first, because it's the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way for you to purchase your tickets. Plus, they have last-minute tickets, flash deals, and zone deals, so it's easy to find and buy tickets now that hockey season is about to take over. I highly recommend you all go and download the Game Time app, and when you do, create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps to get $20 off with your first purchase. Yes, you heard me right. You can get $20 off to go see Connor Bedard down at the United Center this year. All you got to do, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Game Time. Real quick, just another reminder, Mailbag Monday is right around the corner, Blackhawks fans, and I know many of you viewers and listeners have a Blackhawks question that you want answered. Please make sure to drop that down below in the comment section if you're watching on YouTube right now, or you can also DM me on any one of my socials, or even email lockdownblackhawks@gmail.com, and I'll be sure to answer your question when I go live with Mailbag Monday on Monday afternoon. But before I wrap things up here today, though, earlier on in the offseason, as I take a quick stretch, I went through every one of General Manager Kyle Davidson's first-round selections since he was officially named GM back in official GM, not just the interim. He was officially named the Blackhawks general manager in early 2021. But on today's episode, I want to also go through all of Davidson's most notable trades in the 3+ years since he's taken over, because as the Blackhawks start hopefully getting back to relevancy and competing for a Stanley Cup playoff position, don't think it's going to happen this year, but should be coming sometime soon, as I say with my fingers crossed. There is going to come a point in time where it's very important for Kyle Davidson to execute on trades properly. So I wanted to be sure to kind of go through his most notable trades up to this point in time. I do want to preface that I'm not going through every single trade. I think everything I'm going through are all the notable ones. I think some of the ones I left out was like Jack Johnson for Andreas Englund, one Austin Wagner for future considerations, like trades that really wound up affecting neither side. But all the notable ones I am going to be sure to go through here on today's episode. Not going to spend a ton of time on every trade in particular, because we're getting close to 30 minutes here, and this could honestly be like a 30-minute segment if I did that. But just want to kind of give you all a reminder of the deals that general manager Kyle Davidson has made via trade thus far as the Blackhawks GM. First notable trade that he made was acquiring Sam Lafferty from the Pittsburgh Penguins in a 1-for-1 swap for Alexander Nylander, which wound up working out very well for the Blackhawks. Nylander never found his game in Pittsburgh, and funny enough, kind of found it after being moved to the Columbus Blue Jackets last year, whereas Lafferty really found his footing here in Chicago. The Blackhawks actually wound up flipping him to the Maple Leafs for a second-round pick, a deal that I'll get into here in just a moment, but this is one that worked out very well for the Blackhawks. They did momentarily reacquire Sam Lafferty here this summer, only for him not to be picked up by them in free agency, but that was the first notable move made by Kyle Davidson. I would say that was a win for the Blackhawks. The second notable move was the Brandon Hagel trade, where the Blackhawks acquired a 2023 first-round pick and a 2024 first-round pick, which we now know have turned into Oliver Moore and Sasha Boisvert, along with Boris Kachuk and Taylor Radish, who are, of course, no longer members of the Chicago Blackhawks, in exchange for Brandon Hagel, a 2022 fourth-round pick, which Tampa traded, and then a 2024 fourth-round selection. So basically how we can look at it now is the Blackhawks got Oliver Moore, Sasha Boisvert, and two players who helped them tank for Connor Bedard in exchange for Brandon Hagel. Quite honestly, I think this is just going to be one of those deals that winds up working well for both sides. We don't officially know the outcome of this deal because Moore and Boisvert obviously have not hit the NHL scene yet. Brandon Hagel has been a phenomenal piece for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but the Blackhawks are, of course, hoping that Moore and Boisvert are going to be integral parts of their rebuild here in Chicago. So this one, the jury's still out on, as it's going to be for the next couple of years. Next trade, notably made by Kyle Davidson, was acquiring a 2022 second-round pick in exchange for Marc-Andre Fleury. Was a conditional second-round pick that could have turned into a first, but never wound up happening. I think it was pretty fair that the Blackhawks got a second for Marc-Andre Fleury. Some people were upset they didn't get a first, maybe a tad bit disappointing, but this pick turned into Ryan Green, who has developed rather nicely and is a co-captain for Boston University this year during his junior year of college hockey. Next trade is acquiring a 2024 fifth-round pick from Calgary in exchange for Ryan Carpenter. Might not sound like the most noteworthy deal, but that 2024 fifth-round selection did get used later. And then we get to the 2022 NHL draft. where the Blackhawks acquired a 2022 first-round selection, which was the 7th overall pick, and a 2022 second-round selection as well, along with a 2024 third from Ottawa in exchange for Alex DeBrincat. That first-round selection turned into Kevin Korchinski. Second-round selection turned into Paul Ludwinski. And man, I accidentally forgot who this 2024 third-round pick turned into, but it was either AJ Spellacy, John Mustard, or who am I forgetting? AJ Spellacy, John Mustard. Who am I forgetting in the third round? This is going to drive me bonkers. Shame on me. Shame on me. Oh, Jack Pridham. Jack Pridham. He's not in training camp. That's why I remember, for the West Kelowna Rockets, baby. But yeah, this is a really good trade for the Blackhawks, of course. It didn't seem like it at the time, but with DeBrincat only staying in Ottawa for 1 year, I mean, to get the 7th overall pick along with a pretty high second rounder, the 39th overall selection, might have been a little high to take Paul Ludwinski, but the jury is still out on him. Jury is still out ultimately on this deal because we don't exactly know what type of player Kevin Korchinski is, but for only 1 year of Alex DeBrincat in Ottawa, really good return for general manager Kyle Davidson. Another notable trade made that very same day, acquiring a 2022 first-round pick, the 13th overall selection, and the 66th overall selection from the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for Kirby Dach. Those picks, of course, turn into Frank Nazar and Gavin Hayes, two forward prospects I'm super high on. Kirby Dach has had trouble staying healthy with the Montreal Canadiens. Probably worth the risk for Montreal, but this has the potential to turn into a really good deal for the Blackhawks, depending on what Frank Nazar ultimately winds up being. And then they also, of course, acquired Sam Rinzel, or the pick that turned into Sam Rinzel, along with Peter Mrazek in exchange for the Blackhawks' 2022 second-round pick, which Toronto drafted Fraser Minton with that selection, who does look like a somewhat intriguing prospect for them. Sam Rinzel, though, I love his ceiling because of his size, his skating ability. I really feel like he's just starting to grow into his own. And then Peter Mrazek has been a great filler goalie these last couple of years. So this wound up being a nice trade for general manager Kyle Davidson as well. We also have acquiring Jason Dickinson and a 2024 second round pick, which the Blackhawks ultimately ended up using to send to the Islanders to move up a couple of spots and select Sasha Boisvert 18th. In exchange for Riley Stillman from the Vancouver Canucks, Jason Dickinson, who has been awesome here in Chicago, and a second round pick in exchange for Riley Stillman. A+ out of Kyle Davidson on that one. Another A+ here, as the Blackhawks acquired Nikita Zaitsev, a 2023 second-round pick, which turned into Roman Kanserov, and a 2026 fourth-round pick from Ottawa in exchange for future considerations. The Blackhawks didn't give up anything. It's because Ottawa was cap dumping Nikita Zaitsev, and he actually wound up being somewhat okay last year. It was a disastrous start to his Blackhawks tenure. He actually wasn't dreadful last year for the Blackhawks. Now he's back over in the KHL, but a free Roman Kanserov for the Blackhawks, we'll take that. Also acquired a 2025 first, 2026 second, and Joey Anderson in exchange for Jake McCabe, Sam Lafferty, and 2 conditional fifths. Don't know what this first round selection or the second is going to turn into, but Joey Anderson has turned into a nice little piece in and alone of itself. But this has a lot of upside potential for the Blackhawks. Lafferty didn't go on to have a very long or successful tenure in Toronto. McCabe is still there, yeah, but we got a first, a second, and Joey Anderson basically for McCabe and 2 fifths. Winds up working out well for the Blackhawks, methinks. Next, they acquired a 2023 second and a 2025 fourth from the Rangers for Patrick Kane while retaining his salary. Didn't get a ton for Patrick Kane, but that's because they didn't really have a lot of leverage. Everyone knew that Kane was going to wind up being dealt, and the Blackhawks wind up drafting Martin Misiak with that second round selection. So we'll see how that winds up going. Misiak is, of course, going back to Erie this year. Also acquired a 2025 second, which is another future asset for the Blackhawks, and Anton Khudobin, who turned into a Blackhawks legend in exchange for Max Domi. Maybe not the best value for Domi. I was a little bit disappointed with that trade at the time. Maybe the first round pick that I was hoping for was a little out of the ballpark, but still a fine deal ultimately for Max Domi, who, is a good player, but to get a second round pick for him, that's pretty darn good. And then also acquired Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno from Boston for Alec Regula and Ian Mitchell in a straight cap dump. Acquired Corey Perry from Tampa for a 2024 seventh round pick and a straight cap dump, even though that turned out disastrous for Corey Perry here in Chicago. On the ice, he actually got off to a good start to that season. So it looked like it was going to be a good trade until the Blackhawks had to terminate his contract. They also momentarily acquired Anthony Beauvillier from Vancouver for a 2024 fifth round pick, which they, of course, got for Ryan Carpenter. And then they went and acquired a fifth round pick from Nashville. They got that pick right back in exchange for Anthony Beauvillier. The two trades that I think you could probably make the biggest gripe about from Kyle Davidson so far would be the trades that he made before this year's draft, trading numbers 20, 54, and 61 to get numbers 18 and 50. And then he ended up trading numbers 34 and 50 to Carolina for number 27. In terms of value, probably not the best there from Kyle Davidson. But again, the Blackhawks are thinking about quality over quantity at this point in time. They have so many prospects in their organization. We're kind of getting to that point where the prospect pool might almost be too deep. So I really didn't hate them doing this. I didn't love Boisvert at number 18, but I get why they did that. And then the actual last move involving players was acquiring Ilya Mikheyev, Sam Lafferty, and a 2027 second round pick from Vancouver for a 2027 fourth. Vancouver really should just stop making deals with us, because even though we let Sam Lafferty go, this is a free Ilya Mikheyev and a second just because Vancouver didn't want to pay him, just because they couldn't afford to. And all we gave up was a fourth round pick. Man, going through all these trades, it's really clear to me Kyle Davidson has done a very, very good job at leveraging the Blackhawks' financial situation to gain assets. I really, really like the moves that he's made involving most of the big-time players. I mean, there are reasons to believe there's upside in the Brandon Hagel trade, the Alex DeBrincat trade. I mean, we don't know exactly what those pieces are going to be in the future, but we have a lot of high hopes for them. And there really isn't a single trade out of this list, in my opinion, at least, that you can look at and go, wow, that was an utter failure. Maybe they didn't get as much as they would have hoped for Patrick Kane. Maybe they didn't get as much as they would have hoped for Max Domi. Maybe they gave up too much in order to move up in the 2024 NHL draft. But there are no utter failures here in terms of trades since Kyle Davidson has taken over, in my opinion, at least. Go and let me know if you feel the same way down below in the comment section. Quite honestly, this makes me feel pretty comfortable with the potential moves that Kyle Davidson could be making, the meaningful trades these next couple of years that he could be making that will help shape the future of the Chicago Blackhawks. Looking at this list has me really confident in Kyle Davidson's ability to move pieces around and get the better end in terms of the value. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it's available each and every day. As always, you can find me on X at Jack Bushman 2. Check out my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until the next episode, everyone, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.